trying to get back into doing responses to the CES letter, continuing my religious channel. I really want to get back into this, but I've been having a hard time concentrating on things like this. So let's get back into this. It's picking up where we left off. This is section 1, titled The Book of Mormon, issue number 8. And it's a little bit longer, and I will say there is a big, long table, and I think that I will... Well, I'll just read through it really quickly. And then my final disclaimers that I need to put out there. This is just my own views. I do not represent the church or its leaders. I am simply offering my own thoughts regarding the issues that are being raised. So, here we go. Part 1, Section 8. Issue 8. Okay. There was a book published in 1823 Vermont entitled View of the Hebrews. Below is a chart comparing the View of the Hebrews to the Book of Mormon. Let us get through this chart. Okay, we have first column gives similarities. Second column is View of the Hebrews. Third column is the Book of Mormon. So first, published View of the Hebrews in 1823 first edition, 1825 second edition. Book of Mormon, 1830, first edition, to show that it was published afterwards. Location, View of the Hebrews, Vermont, Pulteney, Rutland County. Note, Oliver Cowdery, one of the Book of Mormon witnesses, lived in Pulteney when View of the Hebrews was published. Book of Mormon, Vermont, Sharon, Windsor County. Note, Windsor County is adjacent to Rutland County. Okay, now we get to our list of actual similarities. The destruction of Jerusalem, the scattering of Israel, the restoration of the 10 tribes, Hebrews leave the old world for the new world, religion a motivating factor, migrations a long journey, encounter seas of many waters, the Americas an uninhabited land, settlers journey northward, encounter a valley of a great river, a unity of race, meaning the Hebrews settle the land and our ancestral origin of American Indians, Hebrew the origin of Indian language, Egyptian hieroglyphics mentioned, lost Indian records. On this one they give us the note in View of the Hebrews that talks of a set of yellow leaves buried in Indian Hill, and Elder B.H. Roberts noted the leaves may be gold. In the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith claimed the gold plates were buried in Hill Cumorah. And then back to our comparisons. Breastplate with Urim and Thummim, prophets being spiritually gifted men, transmit generational records, a man standing on a wall warning the people, woe, woe to this city, to this people, while subsequently being attacked. And they give us these notes in View of the Hebrews. It talks of Jesus, son of Mananas, stood on the wall saying, woe, woe to this city, this temple, and this people, came to preach for many days, went upon a wall, cried with a loud voice, preached of destruction of Jerusalem, had stones cast at him. In the Book of Mormon, we have Samuel the Lamanite stood on the wall saying, woe, woe to this city, or this people, came to preach for many days, went upon a wall, cried with a loud voice, preached of destruction of Nephites, had stones cast at him. And they give references for both. Now back to our comparisons. The gospel preached in the Americas quotes whole chapters of Isaiah. Good and bad are necessary opposition. Pride denounced. Polygamy denounced. Sacred towers and high places. Messiah visits the Americas in View of the Hebrews. They equate the Mexican god Quetzalcoatl, known as the white-bearded god, as the Mexican Messiah. Idolatry and human sacrifice. Hebrews divide into two classes, civilized and barbarous. Civilized thrive in art, written language, metallurgy, navigation. Government changes from monarchy to republic. Civil and ecclesiastical power is united in the same person. Long wars break out between the civilized and barbarous, extensive military fortifications and observations with watchtowers. Barbarous exterminate the civilized, discusses the United States, and then the comparison of the name Ethan to the name Ether. Stating this note, Elder B.H. Roberts noted Ethan is prominently connected with the recording of matters in one case and Ether in the other. And give the source for this is the studies of the Book of Mormon. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So here we go. The rest of the issue we have. Reverend Ethan Smith was the author of View of the Hebrews. Ethan Smith was a pastor in Pulteney, Vermont when he wrote and published the book. Oliver Cowdery, also a Pulteney, Vermont resident, was a member of Ethan's congregation during this time and before he went to New York to join his distant cousin, Joseph Smith. As you know, Oliver Cowdery played an instrumental role in the publication of the Book of Mormon. This direct link between Joseph and Oliver in the view of the Hebrews demonstrates that Joseph is very likely to have been aware of the theme and content of that book. It gives weight to all the similarities described in the preceding comparison chart. Apologists may point out that the Book of Mormon is not a direct word-for-word plagiarism of view of the Hebrews, and indeed that is not the claim. Rather, the similarities should give any reader pause that two books so similar in theme and content would coincidentally be connected by Oliver Cowdery. LDS General Authority and scholar Elder B.H. Roberts privately researched the link between the Book of Mormon and view of the Hebrews, Joseph Smith's father having the same dream in 1811 as Lehi's dream, and other sources that were available to Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, and others before the publication of the Book of Mormon. Elder Roberts' private research was meant only for the eyes of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 and was never intended to be available to the public. However, Roberts' work was later published in 1985 as Studies of the Book of Mormon. Based upon his research, Elder B.H. Roberts came to the following conclusion on the view of the Hebrews. Quote, "Did Ethan Smith's view of the Hebrews furnish structural material for Joseph Smith's Book of Mormon? It has been pointed out in these pages, that there are many things in the former book that might well have suggested many major things in the other. Not a few things merely, one or two or half a dozen, but many, and it is this fact of many things of similarity and the cumulative force of them that makes them so serious a menace to Joseph Smith's story of the Book of Mormon's origins." And they give the reference of the studies of the Book of Mormon. While this does not prove that the Book of Mormon was plagiarized from the view of the Hebrews, it does demonstrate that key elements of the story of the Book of Mormon, Native Americans as Hebrew descendants, ancient records of natives preserved, scattering of and gathering of Israel, Hebrew, origin of the Native American language, etc., predated the Book of Mormon and were already among the ideas circulating among New England Protestant Americans. With these ideas already existing and the previously cited issues with the King James Version plagiarism errors, anachronisms, geography problems, and more issues to come, is it unreasonable to question Joseph Smith's story of the Book of Mormon origins as church historian B.H. Roberts did? Update with additional information at their website. Whew! There you go. Okay, so that is the issue that they are raising, and you will note they do not specifically claim, well, they don't claim direct plagiarism. Well, they're really saying, and they pointed out in that one paragraph, that because people theorized that the American Indians were descendants of Israel, that the Book of Mormon should be disbelieved, we should accept the Book of Mormon to be false, because it is just repeating those theories. That's really what this comes down to. This whole issue comes down to that's what they're saying. Because other people theorized about it, the Book of Mormon has to be false. So, first of all, nobody in the church that I know of denies that the theory existed. It existed long before Joseph Smith came on the scene, long before the Book of Mormon was ever translated. Yes, that is true. People had the theory. The Book of Mormon came along and confirmed the theory. That's one of the things the Book of Mormon did, is to confirm that the American Indians are descended from Israel. They are Israelites. Just because they theorized it doesn't mean that any historical record is false. I mean, that is a leap in logic. The Book of Mormon is the historical record that proves the theory correct. And that's what we're saying. On this issue, that's all we're saying. We have no problem with admitting that the theory was there. But the Book of Mormon proves the theory was correct. Now that's the first thing. And I'll actually come back to that main point. That's the main point. And when I talk about the table, I want to talk about that table with similarities. But I want to just mention a couple other things real quick. First, they mention here, B.H. Roberts did research. He talked about the view of the Hebrews. The idea that Joseph Smith's father had the same dream in 1811 as Lehi's dream in the Book of Mormon, 1 Nephi chapter 8, I believe. And they're again saying that because Joseph Smith's father recorded a dream, that is sufficient to believe that the Book of Mormon is false. The issue I have with that is that in order to make that claim, you have to say that God is incapable of giving two people the same dream. Lehi was given a vision in his dream that we call the Tree of Life. Joseph Smith's father. Why couldn't he have been given the same dream? Why couldn't God give the same dream to both men? So, I mean, in the Book of Mormon, he gives it to Lehi and then he gives it to Nephi. Both of them had the same vision. So why can't Joseph Smith's father have the same vision? Why is Joseph Smith's father having that vision in any way meaningful to the truth of the Book of Mormon? Then there was this thing they want to mention, that this statement I find a little bit disingenuous here. They say, Oliver Cowdery was a member of Ethan's congregation during this time and before he went to New York to join his distant cousin Joseph Smith. Now, first of all, I'm fully prepared to admit that Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith were distant cousins. Okay? At this time, most people living in New England were distant cousins. You'd be very hard-pressed to find anybody living in any New England state that was not a distant cousin to everybody else living in all 6 New England states. That doesn't mean they knew each other. That doesn't mean they knew they were cousins. It means that at this time, you had a lot of families that everybody was descended from, because everybody was descended from the same families. From those who came over to originally settle. Most people were descended from those original families. They also use that wording, he went to New York to join his distant cousin, implying, whether purposely or not, implying that his intention in going to New York was to join Joseph Smith's family. When there is no evidence that the two families knew each other before the 1820s. Before Oliver Cowdery came to New York and became a school teacher there's no evidence that the two families had ever met or even knew each other existed. So this whole claim here, it's an attempt to discredit Joseph Smith by trying to make a connection between him and the book View of the Hebrews. Now there's a few issues with that also that we need to cover, and that is, first of all, Joseph Smith had his first vision in 1820, 3 years before View of the Hebrews was published. It was in September of 1823 that Moroni first appeared to Joseph Smith, the same year that View of the Hebrews was published. Now you're not going to convince me that Joseph Smith had any knowledge of View of the Hebrews in that first year that it was published. He may have gotten some knowledge of it later, but not that quickly. So the timeline doesn't work. And as I say, they try to make that connection, this direct link between Joseph, Oliver, and the View of the Hebrews, there is no direct link. Because there is no direct link between Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery until well after Joseph Smith already received the gold plates. And there is no evidence that Joseph Smith ever knew of View of the Hebrews until after the Book of Mormon was published. So they're trying to establish a link through innuendo and suggestion because they can't do it with the facts. And I will close one last thing before I do the table of comparisons. At the beginning of this table, they listed the publication year and location for View of the Hebrews and Book of Mormon. And they got the publication years correct. 1823 for View of the Hebrews, 1830 for the Book of Mormon. But the locations, they changed the location for the publishing of the Book of Mormon in order to again establish a connection that does not truly exist. Because they say here, very correctly with View of the Hebrews, that it was published in Pulteney, Rutland County, Vermont. That is very true. That is where it was published. But then they claim that the Book of Mormon was published in Sharon, Windsor County, Vermont. But the Book of Mormon was published in New York. That is a well-established historical fact. Not just in New York, but in western New York. Several hundred miles away. Now it is true that Joseph Smith was born in Sharon, Windsor County, Vermont. But his family moved away when he was like 4 years old. They had been living in Palmyra since, I believe, 1816 or 1817, something like that. So this is, again, a disingenuous attempt to make a connection that does not exist in the historical record. And this one, I'm not sure that I can even credit them with making it by accident, because it is so well documented where and when the Book of Mormon was published, that for them to claim, even insinuate that it was published in Vermont, is dishonest. Okay, so now let us look at the table of similarities that they presented. Now, their basic argument is that because of these similarities, we should believe that the Book of Mormon was based off of this idea that is presented in View of the Hebrews. But I go back to those 5 truths that I listed in my first video. The 5 truths. The fourth one was that the Scriptures are true. They are the Word of God. Not just doctrinally true, they're historically true. What they say happened really happened. So the question that I ask when it comes to this is, given the Book of Mormon is true, would we expect there to be similarities or differences between the Book of Mormon and View of the Hebrews, presenting this previous historical theory? Now, as I mentioned before, we admit that people had theorized about the American Indians being descendants of Israel. So View of the Hebrews, which quotes extensively from previous scholars, is presenting the historical theory. The Book of Mormon, when we accept it as true, is the historical confirmation or historical proof that the theory was correct. So given the Book of Mormon is true, we would actually expect there to be many similarities between the Book of Mormon and View of the Hebrews or any other book that had been written previously detailing this theory. Because one is the theory, the other is the proof. So for instance, we take this table and we examine each one. I'm not going to go into detail on any of them, but we look here first. We can see these are things dealing with Israelite culture and history. And if we're going to believe that the American Indians are descendants of Israel, would we not expect elements of that Israelite history and culture to be present? Would we not expect the historical theorist to discuss these cultural influences? And would we not expect the historical record to show these cultural influences? Such things as the destruction of Jerusalem, the scattering of Israel, religion being a major motivating factor in the culture, prophets, the Hebrew language, the gospel being preached, pride denounced. These things are all part of Israelite culture. They are all in the Old Testament, the scriptures of the Israelites. So, if the Book of Mormon is true, would we not expect it to be in the Book of Mormon? And would we not expect the theory that had been previously presented to also include these things? But then we continue. What else might we expect? When we remove all the cultural influences from our list, we take what's left over, and then we ask ourselves, how did they get from the Middle East to America? Would we not expect anyone who is theorizing that they did in fact move from the Middle East to America to explain how? And if we are looking at a true historical record of how that happened, would we not expect that to be in that record? And if we're talking about such a journey, would we not expect things such as a long journey? The fact that they leave the old world for the new. Many waters being the oceans, or the meeting in America of great rivers. Would we not expect, in a true historical record, these things to be mentioned? Would we not expect somebody who is theorizing of the migration of a group of Israelites to America to address these issues? And then we continue and we remove these ones from our list and we look at what we have left. And looking at what we have left, we still have to deal with the fact that the American Indians were a very barbarous and uncivilized culture. They were living in the Stone Age. They did not have knowledge of metallurgy, of the written language. They were missing all of these things, and yet the Israelites had them all. And we have records, we have proof of ancient civilizations in the Americas that had all these things. So if you're going to theorize that an uncivilized, barbarous people are the descendants of a refined culture such as the Israelites, would you not have to explain how they went from that sophisticated culture to the barbarous one that they later were? And we see the theory tries to explain it, and then the historical proof gives us the evidence, gives us what actually happened. Would there not be similarities between them? Such as idolatry and human sacrifice, which we know were in the American Indian cultures, but were not in Israel. Such things as the division from being cultured and civilized to being barbarous. Would we not expect wars? Would we not expect fortifications? There are fortifications that have been found. You got to explain these things. If you're going to theorize it, you have to come up with a theory as to how all this happened. And would we not expect that historical evidence would be similar to the theory if the evidence is proving the theory? So when we take all this, we've removed those things of Israelite culture, which we would expect. We remove those things about a journey, which we would expect. We again remove all those things that deal with the regression of culture, of a refined culture to a barbarous culture. And what are we left with? We are left with 9 or 10 things that do not comfortably fit into those 3 categories. And yet many of these things could still be explained easily. Egyptian hieroglyphics, since they're coming out of Israel, Israel was very familiar with Egypt. They would have known the use of Egyptian hieroglyphics. They would have brought that knowledge to America. To theorize that they did is not a stretch, and again, the historical record proving that they did would then match up. But most of these things are insignificant. What's left just doesn't matter. There's not enough to mean anything. So, to conclude this video, Yes, there are many similarities between View of the Hebrews and the Book of Mormon. But given what both books claim to be, if we accept that the Book of Mormon is true, which I do, then given what they are, we would expect these similarities to exist. I would be more suspicious personally if there were not similarities, if there were fewer similarities than there really are. Everything else that is listed in this issue, the attempted connection between Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery and the book View of the Hebrews, the disingenuous distorting of historical facts, such as when the Book of where the Book of Mormon was published, as well as the insinuations of Oliver Cowdery purposely going to join Joseph Smith in New York. All of that is just distraction from the issue. They're trying to bolster the claims about the book View of the Hebrews. But the claims that they are making are meaningless because they are exactly what we would expect if the Book of Mormon was true. We would expect exactly what we find. So none of the rest of it matters. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. Because what we find is what we should find. And I'm going to leave that here. And if you are enjoying it, like, subscribe, and see you in the next video.